Jones Studios has been around since 1879 and is a mid-sized architecture, interior design, graphic design, public art, and planning firm. Brian Farling is an architect and principal at Jones Studio. He leads many design projects with environmental innovation solutions. He believes architecture is a pragmatic art that humans' ingenuity and creativity can shape our world for the better. He focuses on how architecture and the design-built environment can be inspired by the challenge of water scarcity and conservation. Scales of the environment impacts many architects as we move to more sustainable and innovative ways of life. Looking at the two specific projects, architect Brian Farling shows how one can think in a micro and macro world and create projects which give back to nature, bringing people together in these buildings which can have a creative structure and an amazing story.
We had a program, we had a basic idea of where we wanted the building on campus, which was sort of the heart of the campus, because we wanted it equidistant from the upper, lower, and middle schools. So it really became a sort of a cultural hub for the school, rather than if it was at the one end of the campus, it would really be more connected with the lower school or the middle school. So that's kind of macro look at understanding the site and locating a project. We started playing around with what these walls could be, and we were sort of inspired by movement. And at the same time, we thought about what we could construct these of. And this is really sort of the crux of the example of how to sort of think about micro and macro and a site scale at the same time, and how they're so interrelated. And I would say that when they are interrelated and they're connected and they're sort of serving each other, there's bound to be some level of success. When they're not interrelated, I was trying to think about it this morning. I can't think of a good example of when something when the two scales aren't related, because we always sort of develop our projects really sort of thinking about both scales and how they relate. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at a way to do these movement walls, so you get lots of shade and shadow, and they have a big presence on campus. And we were thinking about how you would build them, and we're thinking about just a sort of a simple 8-8-16 masonry module. And we knew inherently that, and we've done this before, that when you take a masonry block, which lots of buildings are built out of these, lots of contractors know how to build with these blocks. If you take one and as you're stacking them, you can offset them a bit. Mm-hmm. And so this wall is an example of sort of offsetting the block as you move up. Mm-hmm. And we said, what if we took the block and for every course, we offset them, basically you can offset each one about a 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch. Over the span of a 50-foot wall, how far could that wall move from top to bottom? And so the understanding the nature of this block, this 8-8-16, typical CMU block, understanding what it can do as you sort of compose it into a wall, mm-hmm. and understanding how you could push the limits of it, led us down the road of looking at these walls that started to wave and move, because as you were going from top to bottom, they were offsetting. And all of this was sort of inspired by this architect, Eladio Dieste, Argentinian architect, really considered a structural engineer, but essentially what he did, and this plan shows, the dark line is the wall at the bottom. And then the curvy line is the wall at the top. And what he's doing is each course changing the shape, so it goes from a straight line to a curve. And so we really decided that we were going to sort of build on that. And I wanted to show you this drawing here in the middle, because this is where we ended up. This sketch is the sketch I did after our meeting with our structural engineer, where we said, okay, we're going to do the straight line at the bottom, similar to Eladio Dieste, mm-hmm. and we're going to end up with a zigzag at the top. And so if you look at that wall in plan, this is what it looks like. So a straight line at the bottom, this zigzag at the top. And we derived how much of a zigzag we could achieve by offsetting each course a ½ inch, the limitations of the small scale and its impact on the larger scale wall. And so this drawing right here is every one of those walls. So this is the wall at the very bottom as a straight line. And then each course, as you go up 8 inches until you get to the zigzag at the top.
Wow. It's amazing.
And so, in plan, you can kind of see these are those walls close to the bottom. And then as you get to the top, these are the walls cut through. And then this is a rendering of those walls, straight line at the bottom, zigzag at the top. And
Phoenix Country Day School is currently in the process of fundraising, and Jones Studio hopes to move towards construction once the budget is fully prepared. An interesting conclusion that Yasmin and I drew from listening to Brian was that the scales of an environment, site, macro, and micro, are most successfully impactful in the design when they are fully integrated with one another. Although we also talked about the site-specific design, such as orientation of thick walls and curtain walls to the sun and mountain views, respectively, it was surprising all the connections that were made between the different scales. They must share a common language to make the project feel more cohesive, rather than feel as if a bunch of random decisions were made as different issues of scale arose. We appreciated Brian's emphasis on the shared language between the scales and how they all come together to form one unified vision rather than individually defining the scales as completely separate entities. Each scale was well thought through and actually ended up to be the basis of the entire project, determining how the design party idea was walked out to communicate this philosophy of movement for the theater. Scales are an extremely important and foundational building block when considering early schematic and conceptual design, and will continue to influence a project into the final stages of its design. Therefore, it is vital to study them closely to determine exactly what the needs, threats, and opportunities a certain site offers.